Hey, Thaddeus of Swift Weddings here. We're a wedding videography and photography company based in Wichita and Kansas City, Kansas. And after capturing weddings for 8 years, I want to share with you our full guide on how to pick the perfect wedding venue. This is obviously extremely important because your wedding venue dictates so many different pieces. What vendors you're going to have, how far everyone's going to have to travel, and really just how the entire day plays out. So this is extremely important. I want to make this streamlined. I want to make this easy for you. So a few things here. First things first, if you're in the Wichita area, I already put together a full guide on actually what venues that we'd actually recommend from our experience. So I'm going to pair that with this. I'll include links to this inside of our document here. And speaking of that, I put together a full document on basically something that you can use to fill out as we go through this together. Whether you want to write, whether you want to type, doesn't matter to me. But I created a document for you that you can fill in because I know that really organizing all this stuff can get confusing. And if you're watching this video, now is the time for you to sit down and really just start to envision how this is all going to work. So let's walk through it here together. We're going to go through step by step. All right, so this is going to be the document. The link to this is in the description. All you have to do to use it is click on the link and then click File, make a copy, and then put it wherever you want, save it somewhere, maybe make a folder for all your wedding stuff. But I definitely recommend that you fill this out as we go because it's really going to make things a lot more smooth for you as we go to actually pick out the venue in the future here. So let's get into it here. First things first, we are going to be defining your vision. That's the main goal here. So first, these are going to be where you actually fill the questions out. So just fill these out to the best of your ability because I know that we may not know all the information here. That's totally fine. This is something that we'll be coming back to and adjusting over time. So these questions are really going to come in handy as we get further in, start looking at venues to help us know what actually makes sense for us. So first question is, what months of the year / days of the month would you prefer to get married in? And now this sounds like a pretty basic one, but I'm going to say right off the bat, you really should consider choosing a couple months. I would say 2 at least, because the reality of it is that, there's a lot of venues that are going to be booked up depending on how far out you're looking for this. We'll get into that in a little bit in terms of how far out you should look, but I'm going to tell you now, having a couple months makes it a lot easier. Summer and fall, they really are the most popular when it comes to the Midwest area. So like May, June, September through November, those are the most popular months. So just be aware that the demand is going to be higher. Therefore, it will likely cost more and likely be harder to get a venue. So just be aware of that. Now, considering what day you actually want the wedding, majority of weddings are Saturdays, obviously, but you can have a wedding on a Sunday. You can have it on a Friday. We've done Tuesday weddings. We've done Wednesday weddings. We've done Thursday weddings. It seems a little bit random, but I will tell you right now, this is just a little cheat code. If you get married any day that's not Saturday, it's oftentimes cheaper. Venues will oftentimes have discounts for non-weekend days, especially if that's something that matters to you. Obviously, I will always say, with it being your wedding, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Do what makes the most sense for you guys. Don't necessarily just make decisions only based on finances. It's something you obviously have to consider. There's a budget. We don't, live in a vacuum here. Things cost money. But if it means, you having the day that you really, really want, make sure you pick the things you actually want rather than trying to go the cheapest route because you can't redo this. Now, you can go ahead and here, you can just basically replace this with your answers. I recommend typing this out because we can think about it, but putting it down on paper does so much for us, and it's something we can reference later in the future. So we can kind of brain dump there. So go ahead and answer that, and we'll jump on to the next question. Okay, so now that you finished the first one, what city and area would you prefer to get married in? This might seem really obvious to you, but understand that there are lots of little variables like, how far do you want everyone to travel? Depending on where everyone lives. If your ceremony and reception are at a different location, like if you're going to get married in church and you're going to have your reception at a different location, you might want to consider how far away is the church from the actual venue. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. This is just preference and something that you should consider when you're choosing what area. Again, like if you said like the Wichita area, if you're from Kansas, that's a pretty big radius. So just consider kind of what makes sense there. I personally, again, would recommend like pick what you want to pick. If you're worried about people driving 20 minutes, obviously you want to accommodate them, but it's your wedding day. So do what you want to do. Most likely people will accommodate it. Go ahead and fill out that one and let's jump on to the next one. So roughly how many people do you plan on inviting? And you may not have a guest count figured out yet. That's totally fine. There's no rush on this. This is just going to be an estimation. I basically just put it into 3 categories, so you can use this to start. I would say something like a small, more intimate wedding would be 50 to 75 or less, medium size being around 100 to 150, and then a large event being like 200 plus. Certain people will say different things in terms of what that actually means in terms of size, but this really will be important because capacity limits inside venues. So narrowing this down will help you start to filter out venues that don't actually make sense for you. So go ahead and write down kind of a rough estimate. Again, you can come back to this and adjust this later, but just write down kind of what you think at the moment. We can always adjust this as we learn more information going through our process here. Okay, next, would you prefer to have your ceremony indoor or outdoor? This is a pretty simple one, but just kind of like, just take a second to envision it. I mean, like seriously, just, close your eyes for a second and just envision your wedding ceremony and how you kind of imagine that. Do you see it outside? Do you see it, maybe it's a sunset, maybe it's, outside in nature, or do you see it inside with, a bunch of candles and, like how do you imagine it? Just take a moment to kind of envision how you might see your wedding day. And then from there, go ahead and write down your answer if you prefer to be indoor or outdoor. And we'll see kind of, considering what venues have indoor, what have outdoor. Obviously, we'll have to have backup plans, but what do you prefer? Again, let's think about what you actually want right now rather than thinking so hard about logistics. Like, what do you want? So go ahead and write that down. Next is, what is the overall theme of your wedding? Is this more of a rustic kind of vibe? Is this something that's more elegant, more classy? Like, consider kind of what that looks like, as well as you can use some other things to kind of give you examples, but the theme kind of dictates these things as well. But just consider kind of what you imagine and what you want, the colors, maybe the decor, what kind of food you might have, really the ambiance. So that will be important, obviously, because the venue is going to be kind of the base of the entire theme of the wedding. So that's something to consider as well. Go ahead and answer that one. And lastly is, what is your approximate budget for a venue? Now, I'm going to say first reason why we're really doing this is because if you have family contributing or anyone else contributing, it's good to just have some kind of estimate and ballpark in there before we dive into venues and start conversations. But I'm going to tell you now, you're probably not going to know what your budget really is for a venue because they range a lot. And, reading online, because you can Google what is the average cost of a wedding venue, and you're going to get all sorts of answers. You're going to get $1,000, you're going to get $10,000. You're going to get all sorts of random answers. And it's just kind of deceptive because the reality of it is that you can't really tell from reading online, when it says packages start at $3,000, $5,000, whatever it says, you can't really take that at face value because there's so many variables involved. You could have a little convention hall in a hotel, which again, nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. It's really straightforward. It's just a small convention hall and, you have to pay for pretty much everything else on top of it. And maybe it only costs $5,000, let's just say, throw numbers around. And then online, you see some other venue and it's $10,000. And instantly you're like, well, why would I spend double? But then you realize that this other venue is beautiful, out in nature, has 2 different ceremony sites. It has all the tables and linens that come with it. Maybe it has a DJ even with it. Maybe they handle the food and catering. You never know what these places include. They can even have overnight stay. Don't take the numbers at face value. You really want to learn what is actually included with these different venues, because I'm going to tell you a little secret that not a lot of wedding vendors are going to tell you. And it's that the reason why most vendors don't list their prices out and just put everything on the website, because the people who have their prices listed on their website are generally the people who are selling on price. They're the people who are basically, they run their business off of being the budget brand, which is totally fine. I want to make this very, very abundantly clear that I really believe everyone deserves to have a wedding that they are excited about, ones that really fulfill their dreams and all their desires. So, everyone has a different kind of budget, and that's totally fine. Just understand that most of these vendors don't share their prices because, quite frankly, people are just looking at numbers, throw it in a spreadsheet and not actually considering what's involved with it. And that really makes it hard for you to make a good decision because we're basically using price as the only variable when there's so many other things to consider. And that's why I'll say get a rough estimate, get a rough idea, but understand that the only way for you to really know what makes the most sense for you is if you go and talk to the different venues, you go and see them in person, you understand what all is included. So I'm going to say take this with a grain of salt when it comes to budget. Everyone has a certain amount of money they can actually spend, and that is totally fine. But again, just understand that everything is going to kind of work a little bit differently depending on who you talk to and depending on what they offer. So let's continue, shall we? All right, we're in stage 2, and I wanted to show you that we have an outline on the side here if you guys want to jump around, if you want to use this later on as you go. So step 2 is going to be to start researching. So I'm going to recommend you a few different paths to start searching for wedding venues, really just like, some specific questions that you'll also want to have answered as well. If you can't find these answers online, try sending an email or just start setting up tours, which I highly recommend tours. Now, let's talk about finding a wedding venue. Now, if you're in the Wichita, Kansas area, I got some good news for you. I already did a bunch of the heavy lifting. I put together an entire blog with in-depth breakdowns on our favorite 10 wedding venues. I have the links to each website. I have videos that we've done so you can actually see what your wedding day could potentially look like there. So go check out that blog here. That's the link right here. Just click that. And inside this, you'll be able to not only see all these different venues, I also made a whole video breaking down each venue, of me actually talking through each of them, showing you pictures, showing you examples. So this is going to give you a lot of information. So go check out this blog here. But that's for people who are in Wichita. If you're not in Wichita, or if you are and you just want to look elsewhere as well, you can go ahead and check out our next methods. Now, if you're in Wichita, I just recommend take our blogs and move on to the next step. Skip some steps, make things simple and easy. We've done all this work for you. For the people who haven't, here's the alternative methods that I recommend and how you can find wedding venues. So first one is Google, obviously. You can just Google wedding venues in your area. And there you go. You're already seeing a bunch of different venues popping up. There's blogs, there's a bunch of stuff. But as you can see by me just Googling this, like this gets really overwhelming really fast, which that's the reason why we made that blog for you guys. So you actually get curated information rather than like it just, you could scroll forever. And this isn't just Wichita. This isn't counting things that are outside of Wichita. So just giving you examples there. That's one way you can do it. Instagram. So you can go to the Instagram Explore tab and you can basically just search hashtag like Wichita, Kansas wedding venue, or hashtag Wichita wedding venue, or hashtag Kansas City wedding venue. You can just search that in the hashtags and you can start to see photographers who have tagged those different places, or venues that have made posts like that. And like I also mentioned here, so this method actually works really well for finding other vendors as well. Like you can find videographers, photographers, lots of different people there. Now, if you're interested in wedding videography, check out the link below where I do a whole breakdown on really what wedding videography is all about, kind of what you can expect from it, because I also understand there's a lot of noise out there. I break down everything you need to know about wedding videography there. So go check that out if you're curious. Now, continuing on is Facebook. So Facebook groups specifically. Facebook groups are super powerful. You can find tons of different vendors here, lots of resources in Facebook groups. So you really just go in on Facebook and you just search city, state, and then wedding, and you should find plenty. You can type it like if you search like Wichita wedding, you'll find Wichita wedding groups and a bunch of stuff. If you search your state, your city, there are tons of groups out there. Now, you can actually make a post in these groups and just ask for recommendations. Now, with our guide, something that's going to go along great with this is you can use this information that you filled out in here, like, we're going to have roughly 200 people. We're going to have, we're looking in this area. We're looking to, probably need to mention the month, but, you can use this information though. You'd say we're looking for an outdoor ceremony. You can use this information and post in these groups, and brides who have been in your exact shoes, who fit the kind of description of a venue that you want, they'll recommend their venues. So that's also just like a nice cheat code. But again, use the information you filled out. That's why we're filling this information out, so you can actually have all that and use it in your search, right? Next is, let's go down to setting up tours. Again, I said this before. We want to start setting up tours as fast as possible because we want to get the experience of the venue. We want to see it in person. We want to meet the staff. We want to just get the feel for it. Because again, like, we're trying to kind of envision our dream wedding day here. And by being there, actually being there on the day of, you can kind of imagine, you can see, okay, like the ceremony would go great here. We can set up tables here. You can start to like actually envision it. And there's really just no way to get that same experience by just looking at pictures online. Now, I put together a list of questions for you to where basically this is what you can ask during your tour. You can ask this over email. They might share all this information with you, but just make sure that you get all this information. Again, you can take this doc, you can print it, you can take a notebook and take that with you and fill it out. Whatever you want to do, whatever makes the most sense for you. But I'm going to run through some questions and kind of why these are important here. First is, what's your availability? Obviously, we need to know if they're available for the dates you actually want. But again, you can insert your months and days that we already chose earlier. Max capacity, so we can make sure that we can fit all the people we want in there. Amenities, bathrooms, different rooms, different, if you can stay overnight. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself if that's involved, but what's the day before, day after, things of that nature. And then what vendors am I allowed or not allowed to bring, because some venues actually don't allow you to bring outside vendors for certain types, like certain venues won't allow you to bring bartenders and they have their own, and certain things of that nature. So ask about what restrictions they have for vendors. On top of that, you can ask about your indoor, outdoor ceremony sites. Also, what kind of backup plans they have. If they're doing an outdoor ceremony site, you got to make sure what happens if it rains. Can we do it inside? So make sure you have a backup plan for that. Next is what restrictions they have, like just overall restrictions. This could be alcohol, kind of like policies on alcohol, bartender, as we mentioned, timing, how late can you guys stay? When do we have to, do we have to do cleanup? Do we have to set up the day before? We have to set up the morning of? Just figure out the timing. One specific one I hear a lot is asking if we can do a sparkler exit, because a lot of venues don't allow it, which is understandable, but just ask if you can do that if you're curious about, or what kind of policies they have on exits in general. Some don't allow you to do flower petals or confetti either. So just kind of see what the policy on exits are. And then what's included. This is the biggest one, obviously, that we spoke about earlier. What does a package come with? Once you get through all the venue, you see how everything looks, everything makes sense. Ask about all these different things. Like, are you going to have a coordinator on the day of? Are you going to have a planner even, which that's usually separate for planners, but just ask. Overnight stay, accommodations, what that looks like. Do they have any decor of their own? A lot of venues do have their own decor. Next is, tables and linens. I've been seeing more venues start offering tables and linens in-house, which makes a lot of sense in my opinion. I know Gooseberry Creek in Wichita is one that does, very convenient. And really just any of these little details like that. I even know venues that have their own in-house DJ. I know venues that even offer bundle packages with different vendors. So there's lots of options there. Just make sure you kind of figure out what all it includes and make sure that you use that when you're considering comparing these different venues, because some you may be getting way more bang for buck, even if they are more expensive, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of the questions. Those are the most important ones here. If you get all these things answered and you like the staff and everything, that's a green flag. That's a good sign. Next is just going to be overall FAQs, just general tips. These are kind of my final words here. So how far out should I actually book my venue? So I'm going to tell you guys this. I have talked with thousands of couples and I hear this discussion a lot, and I really want to share with you the honest truth. If you can go Google this too, and you're going to see people say 6 months, maybe up to a year. I'm going to tell you right now, I would recommend looking in the range of 10 to 18 months out from your goal wedding day. And I know that sounds insane. I know that sounds whoa, that's almost 2 years. But I'm telling you right now, especially after the whole COVID bubble popped, if you want to call it that, where all the weddings that were delayed during that time happened, every venue has just been packed to the brim for the last few years. That's why I'm saying this. I see time and time again that venues are booked out super far. Obviously the venue is the first thing that gets booked during the planning process. So the earlier you get this out of the way, the less you have to worry about it, because everyone else is dealing with the exact same thing you are. So I'm going to say that's for most months. But if you're looking at getting married in the May, June, or September to November kind of section, I would recommend looking out as far as 1 to 2 years. I know that sounds ridiculous once again, but I'm telling you, that's our most popular months by far. Every vendor I know has the exact same scenario where every time we hit those months, it's the craziest months for us. Every venue's packed to the brim. If you want an October wedding, and you're going to have to look as early as you can. It depends on the venue, but I'm telling you now, it really can be crazy with how far out they book. So I'm just telling you that now, so that way you're not basically starting off on the wrong foot, because this can really delay. This can mess up everything if you can't find your venue. Next is just like who should actually attend the tours with you. Like obviously, I think you and your partner should definitely try to both be there. But if there's anyone else who's contributing like financially or even just like moral support, like if your mom is just like your go-to person who you want to talk to and like she kind of like gives you, good advice, bring her too. But especially if someone's like contributing financially and you want their opinion, and I'm going to say if you want their opinion, because you actually may not want their opinion. I understand it can get a little overwhelming to have everyone in your ear telling you what you need to do, but it would be really helpful for you to bring them along, especially if they're contributing financially, because it can really save you like that back and forth where you're like talking to them about like, well, I really like this and I really like this, because you're basically having to then sell them on the idea of your dream rather than just like them actually getting to see it and experience it and meet the staff. Like you're having to then like basically become a salesperson for the venue, and it just makes it so much harder. Like if that's really what you want, it makes more sense to just bring them along so you guys all get to have the discussions together, all their questions get answered, and that way, not that you necessarily can convince them better, but basically just so they're on the same page as you. So that's really important. And lastly, I'm just going to say, go with your gut. Like you might start to feel like a little indecisive after you've looked at a lot of venues. You might have gone on a bunch of tours and you're like, okay, well, I really like this one for this. I really like this one for this. Oftentimes when we go look at venues or we talk to different vendors, we can kind of tell pretty quickly like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So at some point in time, you kind of just have to ask what makes sense for you. When you imagine your wedding day and you envision it all, what aligns the best with that? And that's really what I would recommend going with. Obviously, there are logistical things we have to consider. There are financial things we have to consider. But if those things are taken care of, go with the one that makes the most sense. Try not to be too terribly indecisive, again, because you don't want to lose your venue. And, lean on your partner here. Even if your partner is not as involved in the planning process, get that second opinion, get the third opinion, and try to make a decision fairly quickly, so that way you're not getting stressed out on whether or not you're going to lose your venue. So that's my full guide here. I hope this is valuable for you. I, again, recommend you take this document, fill it out, have this ready to go, and start to make your process that much easier. Again, check out that blog if you're from the Wichita area. If you're from like Kansas City or Oklahoma City or anything like that, I'm going to be making top 10 venues for you guys as well. So if you are from a different area, check out the blog, because I might have actually updated where we actually are making the top 10 venues for. This is going to be on a blog page as well. So if you want to go visit any of that, you can. I'm going to have, again, links are going to be in the description of this video for this document and for the blog. Once again, if you're interested in wedding videography and you're just like, you don't even know where to start, you don't even know like, what does this look like? Does this make sense for me? Go check out the first link in the description where I have a video. I broke down everything you need to know about wedding videography, really just to cut straight through the noise and give you some clarity on what makes sense for you. So go check that out if you're curious. Other than that, I think that's all I have for today. I hope this is helpful for you. Let's not do that.